The flow of water and of time gave life to 1,000 generations. The salmon and the Spokane River that brought them end here. It was the salmon that created and fed the culture, traditions, religion, and spirits of Spokane Indians. Every spring, life would be as it always was. Like the salmon they harvested, there remain only remnants of the people who actually witnessed the spring run. Tribal elders can recall dimly what it was like and what it meant.
The river was just black with fish. Them days, they had a dip net, and they'd catch 1 to 5 fish at a dip.
One of our last chiefs was William Three Mountain, and he was telling us that he had high tolerance for that cold river. He could stand out there the longest and spear fish and bring them out.
I remember it like it was yesterday because I waded out there once and grabbed an eel. And I sure let go in a hurry too. But we got a lot of fish.
We used to have the big garden, and we'd have those watermelon feasts all the time. We'd share all our garden stuff with other people. This was
And he had acres and acres of truck farming. And I now know that he must have had an outlet for his ground cherries, because he had great big fields of ground cherries, and I never did see any on the table. I never did see any, for their own use. So he must have had an outlet for it. But he grew beautiful gardens.
The salmon and the Spokane Tribe of Indians who harvested them here no longer answer. Now they are the stuff of memories and faded photographs. Nature had her ways. Man had his. Grand Coulee Project was the beginning of vast wealth for the Northwest. It was the beginning of the end for 17 miles of the Spokane River and everything the river provided. Worse yet, it was the end of life as the Spokane Tribe knew it, including culture, economy, tradition, and religion.
And we never wanted for anything until Coulee Dam was built. We didn't have nothing.
This is the story of the contribution the Spokane Tribe made to the greatest industrial and economic achievement in world history. It is an untold story of the Columbia system, 30 dams, and the economic power and product of 4 states. The work began in 1933. The promises began even earlier.
You may be assured that whenever the Bureau of Reclamation is authorized to prepare plans and estimates for any such project on the Columbia River, due consideration will be given to the fishing rights of the Indians. Elwood Mead, Commissioner, Bureau of Reclamation, 1932.
For the contribution of everything it had and everything it ever had, the Spokane Tribe was paid $4,700. For 8 years, the project dominated everything in the Pacific Northwest. The thousands of workers who came here, along with local and regional business, were freed from the devastation of America's Great Depression. This, the greatest concrete structure ever built, would create 6,500 million watts of power by the end of 1941. As the dam went up, so did the water. The project meant death by drowning for everything upstream. The condemned were offered as much as $2 per acre, as little as 50 cents. There were no choices. There was no bargaining.
The matter of protecting those valuable Indian rights will receive active attention in connection with applications filed by the interested parties with the Federal Power Commission for Power Development. Assistant BIA Commissioner William Zimmerman, Jr., September 5, 1933.
The Grand Coulee Project was federalized in 1933, changing payment responsibility from state to federal government. The Federal Power Act no longer applied, but the verbal commitment and the chain of promises continued to flow from Washington, D.C. In 1935, a Bureau of Reclamation letter endorsed by Interior Secretary Harold Ickes inquired about, quote, reasonable revenue to the Indians for the use of their lands within the power and reservoir site areas. Federal intent spanned the promises of compensation for loss of land to promises of a share of hydropower revenues and even money for loss of fishery and resources. Federal intent became congressional intent. Where action and settlement failed, acknowledgement remained. In 1976, Interior Department Attorney Lawrence Aschenbrenner lamented the process and its history, comparing federal dealings with the Spokane Tribe with one who learns of an opportunity, prevents the beneficiary from getting it, and seizes it for himself. Yet, even in the face of congressional intent and direction, federal agencies continue to delay, if not obstruct, the fair and honorable settlement. Before, during, and after federalization of the project, U.S. government officials continued acknowledgement that a share of power revenues should accrue for both the Colville and Spokane tribes. The tribe lived and succeeded on this and the Columbia River. Earning a living was relatively easy, with so much so close at hand. The wealth and resources available here provided or created the community that existed, just as it would anywhere else in the world. The river and its resources spawned farms and towns. It was once home to the United States Army. Indians and non-Indians shared this region. Compensation for non-Indian homes and community infrastructure was promised and provided. Indians, on the other hand, were simply told to take their $4,700 and get out of the way.
They use it for barging, use it for hauling wheat, they use it for flood control in Portland, and they use it for all these things. That's aside from the billions of dollars that have been made from the electricity production from the dam. But for some reason, the United States doesn't think it's necessary that we're paid for our contribution to that, which is what it is.
In December 1941, tribal leaders left behind the construction here and headed for Washington, D.C., where meetings at the Department of the Interior were scheduled to discuss settlement. On December 7th, 3 days before the meetings were to begin, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor hurled the nation into a world war. The Grand Coulee Dam was more important than ever. Negotiations, tribal leaders were told, would have to wait until the war's end. Interior Department officials made their promise. The war ended less than 4 years later. The promise was never kept. By law, by historic agreements and the honor and commitment within them, the federal government is required to maintain a trust responsibility with Indian tribes.
We are really trying to find other ways to make it fair, but of course we're running into a lot of opposition by the United States government.
To many here, trust responsibility comes often more in words than deeds.
Because if you Indians are going to be fair, you'll take what we're offering you. And forget that 45 years that we made billions and billions of dollars off of your land.
Now a part of Washington's Lake Roosevelt, the river slows and dies each year. But the water, as it falls and rises, still changes the landscape. The tribe keeps watch on the water, the land, and the cultural resources that remain here. The river, once so full of promises, is now a threat. The land and the forests fall away into the water, exposing new problems.
How do you sit 1,500 miles from here or 2,000 miles and decide for a tribe when you don't know actually what is taking place on the ground? There was a lot of ceremonies lost because of the lack of the fish. A lot of culture was lost along with the building of the dam. And cultural resources to elders were very important as to the cultural sites along the river. Some they determined as sacred sites, and the damage to these sites and the damage to the land, it hurt a lot of people in this respect.
Grand Coulee Dam has been worth hundreds of millions of dollars just as a tourist attraction. Visitors have come here from every state, every Canadian province, and possibly every nation in the world just to look at it. As great as it looks, it represents much more. Grand Coulee is the linchpin in a system of 30 dams, ranging from southeast Idaho into Montana, British Columbia, Washington, and Oregon. Hydropower, flood control, and water for homes and irrigation are the immediate results. The system touches every industry, every business, every family, and every life. The Columbia Basin below Grand Coulee should be a desert. Far from it. This desert is flowered by everything from alfalfa at ground level to the apples in the trees. The desert climate remains, but this region has water to irrigate 500,000 acres. The value of crops alone here exceeds $500 million annually. But it takes much more to do all this business. Farmers and growers are followed by entrepreneurs. Many are here just to bring the crops from the fields. The water flows to industry where crops are processed and become food for the table. More industry is needed because this is one reason why America feeds itself and sends its bounty to feed the world. You can discuss it in billions annually, then hundreds of billions. Over time, the impacts of Grand Coulee and the system it controls have easily reached trillions of dollars, say economists. From this dam and others came the electricity to make aluminum and 350,000 aircraft vital to the Allied effort in the Second World War. Electricity from these lines was critical in making the atomic bombs that ended the war. The American people contributed public lands and resources to make all this possible. Compensation for that came and still comes downstream. It includes almost $1 billion per year in electricity and irrigation that subsidize agriculture. For non-Indians downstream, benefits came daily. One economist said it is beyond economic science to compare the value of all this with the $4,700 payoff to the Spokane Tribe. It would be, he said, like comparing the length of your driveway with the distance to Mars. In fact, the tribe is still paying for the dam and all it produced. This water now represents major problems to cultural and environmental resources. The up and down lake levels create new and different flows, changing ecosystems and destroying habitat. Despite constant effort and expense, jurisdiction over natural and cultural resources here is rendered as fluid as the lake itself. And there is pollution to consider, distributed and remobilized in the currents below. The river and the promises are not forgotten. Together they represent an open wound and an issue of honor. Tribal leaders want to close this old wound with a fair and honorable agreement.
They always took the position that if they stalled long enough, they'd have to leave it up to the next administration.
To the Spokane Tribe, administrations seem to flow like a river. Beginning with Franklin Roosevelt, the tribe has dealt with 11 presidents and their administrations. When one makes a promise, the next one does not necessarily have to keep it.
The faces change and the promises are forgotten. In losing a culture, when the Spokane Tribe and the Spokane River and the parts of the Columbia River that are now the backwaters of Lake Roosevelt, that was our home, that was our life. So much so that our spirituality, our religions, everything evolved upon what was taken from the river.
This lake and the water in it also took lands and the same resources from the Colville tribe. Although it took some 60 years to get it, the Colvilles settled with the federal government in 1994 for a lump sum of $53 million and $15 million annually in perpetuity. It is arguable whether even that is enough. The Spokane Tribe sought to be included when the Colville settlement was reached. Fearing its claim would sabotage the Colville's efforts, the Spokanes agreed to wait, in exchange for yet another promise, that their own claim would receive prompt attention by Congress and the federal government. Time passes. 10,000 years of life and culture disappeared almost overnight. Federal officials, meanwhile, argue that the tribe lost its opportunity when it missed a 5-year statute of limitations deadline for August of 1951. Yet it was the federal government's own Bureau of Indian Affairs whose responsibility it was to advise and make sure the claim was filed promptly. The federal government had the responsibility. The tribe had no choice but to trust. Another half-century has passed. Still lingering are the tribe's losses. Still lingering is the pain of injustice and insult. Unending is the tribe's effort to right these wrongs.
Since we were just this little small tribe over here next to the great big tribe over there, they didn't really worry about us a lot. And they didn't worry about our interests very much. And they made sure the Cowles knew everything and knew that they had all the information they needed to file their claim, but they did not worry too much about the Spokane Tribe.
Most of the stuff that we learned about the river, we learned from elders before us. It is an honor song, and it's a song of respect, you know. And most times when you sing an honor song, it's in respect to whatever you're honoring. And if we're honoring the river or whatever, we'll probably sing this song.
Where there is honor, there must be hope.
I firmly believe that that there are people out there who will eventually come forward and see and know how to get it done.
We have a feeling for the river. We have a feeling for everything around us. And not everyone can say that. Not everyone can say, well, this is where my great-great-grandfather walked. They can't go back to the same burial grounds from their ancestors that lived before Christ was born.
The tribe is as modern as it is ancient. Leaders here are expected to achieve their goals and do so with honor. They answer to endless generations, whether they be long dead or yet unborn.
What the nation has gained from what the Spokane Tribe has lost, you can't put a number on that. I mean, it would be impossible.
This river, once black with fish, now holds the water that is used for salmon recovery. At the expense of the Spokane River and its fishery, the water held here is eventually sent through the system, creating needed flow for salmon runs in the spring and fall, all of them far downstream, and much of them for the non-Indian public. Leadership here includes the guidance of elders, where wisdom is a product of experience and age. It is also a product of tragedy, where open wounds and broken hearts have given rise to endurance and survival. Life and leadership here leave no choices, not in this fight.
The feeling that you have for it, when you think back on it, I wasn't even born when they started construction on the dam, and I'm 56, going to be 56 years old pretty soon. So you think about that, growing up with that, and seeing that water down there, and seeing seeing the Coulee Dam, and then finding out that that was our land that they're using to store that water.
No choices and no quitting.
We're river Indians. We lived on that river. For what we had down there and what was in place down there, it's desecrated every year. Every time we draw down there, it's desecrated. Graves come open, camping sites come open, and they're eroded. And so there's no payment for that. And we have been willing to give. We're willing to compromise. But once we compromise, they ask us to give more. They keep asking us to give more. And so I just decided that I'm not going to give any more. So I guess that's where the emotions come in. I just decided I'm not going to give any more.
Like driftwood in a fire, the promises burn fast. The tribe remembers each one. This tribe remembers that the only promises kept are the ones given by their Creator. Others are fleeting, and the tribe has heard a river of them.
I find myself talking to it. I might ask, River, do you remember how it used to be? The game, the fish, the pure water, the roar of the falls? You fed and took care of our people then. For thousands of years, we walked your banks and used your waters. You would always answer when our chiefs called to you with their prayer to the river spirit. Sometimes I stand and shout, River, do you remember us? Alec Sherwood, 1973.